All right, folks, you know you're in for a treat when you hear that tune because it's time for another week of the Rec Poker Podcast. I'm your host, Bluff Sterini, in the home game and at Rec Poker Jim on Twitter. I go by Jim Reed in the real world, and I have the best freaking job in the world talking poker with my friends here on the Strategy Forums edition of the podcast on Monday nights. I want to thank our sponsors, the Running Aces Hotel, Racetrack, and Casino. If you want to find out more about them, head to runaces.com. Most of what we do here is free. We're a largely volunteer-based organization, so we depend on support from our sponsors and from our amazing premium members. And if you're thinking about taking a dip into the premium membership here at Rec Poker, we'd love it if you did. Use the code RecPoker at checkout and get your first month for only $5. Now, they let me host the show here on Mondays, but I am just one man, and it takes a village, a group, a crew to run Rec Poker, to make the magic happen here. If you want to find out more about the Wrecking Crew, you can go to rec.poker/crew, but you can also just listen up. You're going to meet a few of them right here on the air tonight.
Hey guys, I'm Joseph Wills. I am Hockey_Poker on the Twitter Xverse, and check out my Be a Better Fish series on the website.
I'm Kim Kilroy. I am PetVet or PetVet33 on most social platforms. I'm Fergie56 in the home game. And I run a hand history review group on the second Wednesday of the month on Rec Poker.
I'm Rob Washam. You can find me as Rabman50 just about everywhere. And the first and third Wednesdays of each month, you can join me for the Rec Poker book study.
I'm Sasha Sutton, Poker for Girls on Twitter. And you can join me the first and third Saturday of every month for a mastering mindset workshop.
I told you, folks, I've got the best job in the world. I just get to hang out here on Monday nights and talk about poker with these fantastic people. And every once in a while, my job gets even better because we get a surprise visit from a poker celebrity. It's true, Faraz Jaka. We're going to make him feel really uncomfortable by heaping praise on him. He's here. He's going to talk to our podcast audience about a strategy segment here on the forums edition of the podcast. So if you're not familiar with Faraz Jaka, you should tune in to episode 549 of the chats. We just had him on the show a couple weeks ago to get to know him a little better. And he's Jaka Coaching is the newest addition to our Learning with Partners program here. So it's going to be another way, by joining Rec Poker, you can come meet some of these fantastic coaches and training sites out there. I'm so happy to introduce you to Faraz Jaka. Faraz, thanks for coming back on the Rec Poker podcast. This is going to be fun, man.
Yep, thanks for having me. So the plan today is we're going to talk about 3-betting without memorizing charts. We're just going to go through 2, maybe 3 hands. And my goal here is that obviously you can go look at these spots and see what you're supposed to 3-bet, but I want to make sure we understand the logic behind the play so that you can figure out what you should be 3-betting in any given situation. And then how do you adapt when someone is too loose or calling too much and so on. So yeah, I'm ready to jump right into a hand if you guys are.
That sounds great, man. Let's spill some knowledge.
All right, so we're going to go here and share my screen. Everyone can see that okay?
Yeah, that's right. So if you're listening along at home, you'll get something out of the audio version of this podcast, but I encourage you, head on over to YouTube and subscribe or at least watch this video on our YouTube channel. You'll get more out of this because Faraz is going to be sharing some visual elements to the lesson today.
Okay, so we have a hijack player opening. This is in a tournament. They have about 40 big blinds. They open to 2.1 big blinds. Folds to us in the small blind. We have 60 big blinds with ace-8 offsuit. Big blind also has 22 big blinds. So my question here, first of all, is what would you do with this hand? Do you think this is a reasonable 3-bet bluff? Is this a hand we should be 3-bet bluffing all the times, occasionally or never? What do you guys think? Also, it'd be great if you want to add, if your answer is no, then what would you 3-bet bluff here? What are the type of hands? Yeah, do you want me to just call on 1 a year or 2 a year? You guys?
Well, let's see if anyone unmutes. I'll put myself on the altar first. This is the kind of hand that I know I'm never calling with. It wouldn't surprise me if I was folding with it some of the time and 3-bet bluffing with it some of the time. The reason it's going to be a candidate for a 3-bet bluff is because it has an ace blocker, which is one of the things that I'm looking for when I look to find those spots. And let me start with that, and we can see what everyone else thinks. Rob, I think you unmiked as well.
Yeah, I really don't like this as a 3-bet, even though it's a 3-bet bluff. I know the ace blocker is great, but I hate the 8. So I would like to say maybe ace 10 plus. So like ace 10, ace jack, I think are great 3-bet candidates. Of course, you're going to do the ace king, ace queen anyway. And then maybe ace 4, ace 5, and I really like the suited varieties better. So that's just me. I'm kind of nitty.
Okay.
I
Go
like
ahead.
it as a call for myself. I don't particularly like to. I wouldn't fold. Jim said he would fold or 3-bet. I would probably call most of the time here. I'd prefer to, for offsuit aces, I would stick with ace jack and up and maybe ace 5 offsuit. But um, and then I'm not sure. I guess that could be a bluff. I'm not really sure of where the bluffs from the small blind should come from.
Okay, and then I'll just go ahead and here, and then I'll ask those of you who didn't get the answer on the next one. So basically, some of you said you would 3-bet this. Some have said maybe call. Some said no. Standardly, I would not 3-bet this. And the way I would go about figuring out my 3-bet bluff range here is first you want to ask yourself, what is the bottom of our continuing range? What are the bottom hands that feel like it's okay to maybe call here? And I would say that's somewhere around hands like ace 10, king 10 suited, queen jack suited, queen 10 suited. That feels kind of like the bottom. And the way you find your bluffs are they're at the bottom of your continuing range because they kind of feel like I kind of want to call this, but it's kind of on the border. So that's the first characteristic that needs to be true. And then the second characteristic that needs to be true is it has to have good blocker effects. And you guys mentioned that an ace is a good blocker. Someone mentioned that the 8, not so much. I agree with that. I would say ace 9 off would be kind of the standard 3-bet bluff hand here. Ace 10 off is kind of in the middle where like you could call it or you could 3-bet bluff it. And let's go ahead and talk about, I guess let's talk about some other hands that would 3-bet bluff here. Go ahead, Jim, you got a question?
Yeah, one question I just want to clarify for our listeners. When people talk about the bottom of their continuing range, I just want to reinforce that we're talking about hands that are good enough to be in our continuing range. We're just going to use them as 3-bet bluffs as opposed to calls. We're not going to be adding hands that just didn't quite make the cut. So we're not extending beyond our continuing range. We're just taking the hands that are at the bottom of them. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. And we're going to visualize that in just a second. Let me go ahead and change what I'm sharing here real quick. So let's go ahead and look at this pre-flop chart. And we can see that, right, this is the bottom of our continuing range here with the ace 9, ace 10 off. And then I want to focus more on these suited hands because the trend I want you to focus in on is a little more obvious here. So we're 3-betting hands like ace queen suited for value. And then we're kind of just calling ace jack suited, ace 10 suited, king jack suited, queen king suited. And then we're 3-betting stuff like king 9 suited. So the reason we're not 3-betting king jack suited and king 10 suited is because they're too strong. We don't want to 3-bet those and then the person jams and now we just wasted such a good hand. Whereas with stuff like the king 9 suited, the jack 9 suited, the queen 10 suited, we don't mind wasting them. So that's one good thing it has going for it. And the second good thing it has going for it is we get hands that dominate us to fold. So let's pretend we 3-bet here with the king 9 suited, with the ace 9 off. This is how our opponent responds, right? So notice we get king 10 off to fold, we get king jack off to fold, we're getting ace 10 off to fold, right? Dominating hands. Now, that's why it doesn't make sense to 3-bet a hand like king jack suited, because what are you accomplishing? You're just getting worse hands to fold, right? When we have king jack suited, we actually want to keep the king 9, the king 10 off, those hands in the pot. So if we kind of go back there and visualize that again, right, we're 3-betting the top of our range, these green cards, and then we're flatting the middle of our range to sucker in worse hands. It's almost like a slow play. And then we're 3-bet bluffing with the bottom of our range. Any questions there?
Lead on. Love it.
Okay, cool. So, And obviously, there's a lot more we can talk about and get into more detail if we wanted to talk about value and stuff. But I think it's the bluffs where a lot of people are lacking, or they don't know what the right logic is to find the bluffs. So I'm really kind of focusing this more on finding three bet bluffs. So let's go ahead and look at another hand here. So this time we have King 10 offsuit in the cutoff, about 30 big blinds deep, 28 to be exact. And we have a middle position open in the low jack. And so yeah, let's call in the other two who didn't get to answer the first time. And rather than telling me if this is a three bet or not, I want you to do the exercise, the thought process exercise of what is the kind of bottom hands we should be considering continuing or entering this pot with as a call. So think about what's the worst ace, the worst king, the worst queen you might continue with here. Let's go ahead. Whoever wants to jump in first.
Yeah, I would say the worst probably ace seven, ace eight, maybe.
Okay, and
Because
suited or
obviously you're
offsuit?
in what's that?
Suited or
I would even do probably ace eight suited. I don't think I would do offsuit there. And again, you're in position, which obviously that's going to help as well.
Okay, so you said ace eight offsuit. Now, what about your worst suited king and your worst offsuit king?
Say maybe king nine suited. The offsuit, probably king 10 would probably be it right there. If I'm gonna three bet anyway.
Okay, well, so I'm asking, what is kind of the worst ones you might call with?
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah,
Okay.
the worst. So, yeah, what's the worst suited king you might call with, or worst offsuit king you might call with?
Um, I'd probably say either king nine, suited or unsuited, but I may not be the best to ask for that.
Okay, and then the offsuit, what king are you feeling is worth continuing here?
Um, that's probably at least my range would be the king 10 offsuit. I think
Okay,
that would still be right there in my
so
range.
I would say, or actually, let's get Sasha to answer first before I jump in.
Actually, I think Sasha just
Okay,
disconnected, unfortunately, so
okay,
we might
no
get her
worries.
back. Yeah.
I'll jump into the analysis. So the first thing we want to ask ourselves with whether what is the worst king we can call with is there's a phrase, it always takes a better hand to call with than it does to raise with. And the reason for that is when you're raising, there's two ways you could win the pot. You could end up with the best hand, or you could just bluff them and win that way. Whereas when you're calling, there's only one way to win. Your hand has to hold up. So if we think about the fact that it takes a better hand to call with than it does to raise with, so we ask ourselves, what is this person raising? Right? We want to be ahead of their range, not behind it, not equal to it. We want to be ahead of it. So I would say this person's probably raising king 10 offsuit, not king 9 offsuit. So if they're raising king 10 offsuit, we want to be ahead of that, meaning our bottom of our flatting range should be king jack off, king queen off, right? So you were just off by one pip there. And then we could do that same thing with the aces, right? What's the worst ace they're opening? Maybe ace nine off. So that tells me that the bottom of our calling range is either ace jack or ace 10. And those border hands, right? That ace 10, that ace nine off, that king nine suited, right? Those become our three bets because they're just not quite good enough to call with. They're not ahead of their calling range. So that's one way we could find our three bet bluffs. And then the second way we could find our three bet bluffs is we ask ourselves, if we three bet here, like I did, this was a little bit of a loose three bet. I extended that range further down one notch because I thought this player was a little bit loose. So I asked myself, am I getting dominated hands to fold? Am I getting king jack off to fold? Am I getting ace 10 off to fold? And I think from these positions, yeah, depending on the player, you can get some folds there. So yeah, really, if you kind of ask yourself those two questions and also make sure you have good blockers, that's where you're going to find your good three bet bluffs. Sorry if that disappeared for a second. Let's go ahead and just look at the chart real quick for this scenario. And yep, we kind of show the green three bet hands again. So we see, right, king jack off is a little blue, right? That's the bottom of our calling range. And that's why you see kind of these green three bets with king 10 off, queen 10 off, and so on. And then same thing if we look at the suited region. right? These are the bottom of our flats, and the hands just below our flats are where we find a 3-bet bluffs with. Now, if I think this player is very loose, like lots of times I'll have a player be like, well, this guy was crazy, he was opening all sorts of stuff. So that's why I 3-bet, king 7 offsuit or king 3 suited, right? That's way too far off the chart. If you think this guy's opening too loose, just take these ranges and literally go 1 pip wider. If they're a maniac, then go 2 pips wider, but don't just pick random things off the chart.
That's one question I have for us, because I think recreational players, we don't get the volume in that pros do. And so we never hit our actual frequency, if you know what I mean. We never get to express an actual frequency of hands in the long run. So instead, we find ourselves in these spots where it's like, oh, this is a player that I should be 3-betting against, and I have a pretty good candidate for that, even though it's a couple pips down. How important is it to find those extra bluffs in spots like that? Or is it just not something we should be trying to do? Should we just be sort of playing in a more straightforward, balanced fashion and not worrying about that as much?
I mean, I think you should be trying to find those bluffs, but you have to wait till you get the right hands. And I think that's something people have a challenge with. It's like, I know this person's full of it and they feel like they need to do something about it. And that's where poker takes discipline, right? Sometimes someone is going after it and you just cannot do anything about it because you're not even getting the right cards to fight back with, to bluff with, and so on. So it really takes 2 things to be true. You got to have the read on their range, and you got to wake up with the right cards to potentially even try to battle them.
Yep, I think that's a great point. 1 pip or maybe 2 pips in extreme circumstances, but don't just go willy-nilly because you think you found a good spot. You still need the right hand characteristics.
Yeah. So on jakacoaching.com, we have the MTT crash course, which is kind of the holy grail. And the first lesson in there is 3-betting without memorizing charts, where we go through all these scenarios, but we go through early position, late position, out of position, deep stack, shallow stack. And it's really a 45-minute lesson where there's no reason why you shouldn't walk out of that really knowing everything you need to know about 3-betting without memorizing charts. And then it's just a matter of getting the reps in.
Fantastic. Unless anyone has any other questions for Faraz, we'll wrap this one up. We're going to come back next week and talk about some post-flop edges that you can express. I found over at Jaka Coaching there as well. Doesn't look like it. All right, Faraz, thank you again. Folks, if you like talking to Faraz and the rest of us, you'll find some links in the show notes where you can work more closely with Faraz and his crew over at Jaka Coaching. And I just want to thank the Running Aces Hotel, Racetrack, and Casino, Rob Washam, Kim Kilroy, Joseph Willis, and I'm going to share the audio on my computer so that everyone else can hear it coming for a week of the Rec Poker Podcast. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.